Hello and welcome to the show. Now when it comes to daunting racetracks, Bathurst is certainly right up there. While it's not quite as long as the likes of Nürburgring, this is still an incredible challenge simply to get cars around. It's pretty damn high speed and you go through incredibly narrow sections. This part across the top over the mountain is close to being flat out in decent high grip cars where you've got solid concrete walls either side of the road. I actually get a little bit on the grass, very nearly slide the Ford here into the wall. It is, a very, very challenging circuit to drive. After you've got across the top of the hill, you then go down through the S's here. Incredibly steep downhill section with, again, very little in the way for the margin for error at all around here. And this all got me thinking, it's difficult enough to drive cars around here normally, but what about tackling the hill the opposite direction? What about a hill climb championship? You see, we haven't really done, well, there's not really the roads to normally do one of those in Forza 7, but what if we were to make our own little competition, running the wrong way, essentially, up the Bathurst mountain? It sounded like an interesting idea. Now, initially it was planned to be a kind of 1v1 knockout tournament, however, it proved rather difficult to overtake. It kind of became a drag race towards the first corner, and then whoever didn't make a mistake. So, instead, we opted to go for a time trial format. We were to be using A-Class cars, rear-wheel drive A-Class vehicles. I opted to go for a Ferrari 288 GTO. My plan was that this car would be a pretty decent handling vehicle, but you do need a fair amount of power because, well, you're going up a very steep hill, so 440 horsepower in my Ferrari, just 2,300 pounds as well. Good power to weight ratio, decent sized tyres. I don't have race tyres on the vehicle though. I do only have sport tyres to keep the PI in A-Class. I hope that it was a good combination of speed, acceleration, and enough corner grip to get through the S's, because while of course your initial launch is going to be important down towards the first corner, trying to carry speed through the S's, certainly with a very, very high powered car, would be on the rather difficult side. Now our first contender to take on the course would be a Chevrolet Camaro. You will spot plenty in the background of cars trying to warm up their tyres before they set off on their respective runs. You didn't want to have cold tyres heading on to this course. Now, as I said, most of us will have driven this course plenty of times the correct way around. It is incredibly, incredibly difficult to drive this course the wrong direction. It's an awful lot worse trying to get the cars up through the S's than it is coming down through them. There's a lot of these kind of blind corners that are relatively open on the way in that suddenly get very, very tight as the Camaro almost takes a trip towards the tyre bundles. And then once you're through the S's, these next turns are high speed, but it's about bravery. How much dare you push the car through this corner? You're only going to get one try. If you go too fast through them as the Camaro back end's almost letting go out towards the wall, the finish line would be by that Armour All sign, and that would be the Camaro having completed the run up. Of course, clonks the wall after the finish line, but there we go. Camaro would set the benchmark, a 51.4. We didn't really know whether that would be a good time or not. Just keeping the car out of the wall was very, very important, funnily enough, up this course. So, yeah, with it only being one attempt through here, we had a few practice runs to get a feel for the track, but really needed to keep the car out of trouble. Infiniti Q60 would be the next car. Our first two vehicles were relatively larger, relatively heavier cars to take on this course. Now, they'll be good in terms of sheer power, having the power, having the torque to simply accelerate up the incredibly steep parts of the course, but perhaps not so good for agility when it comes to these opening corners. Things are looking relatively good for the Infiniti early on as we head up towards the tighter section on the track. Gets slowed down for the first part, carries a little bit too much speed through the mid-corner. All it takes is the tiniest of brushes on the wall. Actually, very surprising to see the car go round in such a manner. It wasn't a particularly big hit. Expected the car just to bounce off the wall and carry on, but Yeah, that's enough. It was just enough to upset the rear-wheel drive car and stick it around in a circle. Does a very good job, actually, of recovering the Infiniti. It's a clonk on the wall heading up towards the finish line as well. It does very well to recover it as quickly as he did, but that would be the Q60 finish. It's a 53-0 from that car. To have had a spin and still been that close to the Camaro is pretty damn good going. It was kind of fortunate the way the car ends up pointing in the right direction to continue onwards, but yeah, all it takes is just asking that fraction too much, use that couple of centimetres too much road, and you will be in trouble. The next car, someone else had gone down the Ferrari route. A 355 would take on the course third. Mid-engined, of course, in this one, rear-wheel drive will be relatively light. Of course, I don't know exactly the specifications of the cars that I was up against, but yeah, relatively light. Again, going for a similar tactic to me, really, with the vehicle. I also apologise for the sound on the replays. I don't know what it is about the game, the replays. I'm a little bit confused with, with all of this one. Either way, it's nice and smooth from the 355 here. You will kind of, again, I noticed a lot when watching back through these replays. You will see a lot of cars not necessarily using the whole of the road. That is because it is so very difficult to judge quite where the limits are. The Ferrari, it is a more cautious run from the 355. It is a more cautious run as he comes across the finish line, but importantly, while it bonks the wall, having completed the run, didn't scrape it on the way up, and that would put the Ferrari to first, a 50.9, half a second down the road from the Camaro. Yeah, being that little bit cautious, while it might not look spectacular when it comes to climbing up the course, by making sure that you don't scrape along any of the walls, you will get a half-decent time. The next car to go, the Meyers Manx. Very small, very, very light indeed. So acceleration is always going to be pretty damn good in this car. Controllability when it comes to the corners is a question mark over this one. Now, we have seen some very fast Manxes in the past. We've seen some very out of control ones, and no one was sure quite how it would go with this. That being said, while there is a brush on the wall that claimed the Infiniti, the Manx gets away a little bit better with that. Is making the most of all of that acceleration. I imagine not the most comfortable experience through the corners, and it is, again, fairly cautious around these higher speed sections. And a little bit, almost airtime across the crest there is a bit scary towards the wall, but keeps it all under control, and again can make the most of that acceleration once you've got the car around the corner. There's a couple of clonks on the Fujitsu signs, but it would go fastest. It's the first vehicle under the 50 seconds for the climber, 49.4. It is a fair way faster than that Ferrari 355, even with a couple of dicey moments for the Manx. Is a good run. Is a good speed for the following cars to try and beat. A very interesting competitor up next, the BMW Touring Car. Now, this starts off as an S-Class car. To drop the PI down to A-Class, you would have to be running this on drag tyres. Now, drag tyres pose an interesting conundrum because they will be very good launching. The car will be very, very quick off of the line. It'll put its power down to the road very well, have very good traction launching and perhaps accelerating out of some of these corners as well. You're never going to get wheel spin with this car. However, the corner grip itself isn't so great. The vehicles tend to become quite understeery. Having said that, BMW wiggles its way through Skyline, which, yeah, not quite what you would expect from a drag tyre shod car. But then again, the drag tyres will make it more understeery than it would be normally, but it is a full-on race car as it's heading up now towards the finish line. It was a very good run from the BMW. A couple of slidey moments that we hadn't necessarily seen from some other vehicles so far, and it would be the touring car that would go fastest and push out that benchmark a little bit further into the 48.9 for the BMW, half a second clear of the Manx. But that does go to show just how decent a run it was for that buggy. You wouldn't necessarily expect it to be within half a second of the touring car. The next vehicle to take on the course, a Renault 5 Turbo. Another one going for the small and light category. If you like, oh, again, we've seen very, very quick Renault 5 Turbos in the past. By the looks of it, though, this one not fitted with race tyres. Again, you're going to want some of that acceleration. You're going to want some power in your car to get it up the hill. Unfortunately, as you can already see, the Renault wiggling around under power, and it's just pushed a little bit too hard. The tyre bundles would claim their first victim. Not a nice, neat spin for the Renault, unlike the Infiniti running that little bit too wide. Actually, not the easiest place to recover. Not the easiest place to have a crash. Not the easiest place to have to try and recover a car at that point on the course. All it takes is carrying a mile an hour too much speed, a couple of miles an hour too much speed into a corner, and you will be in a fair bit of trouble. The Renault 5 struggling with rear-end grip, just not quite got enough of it for this very, very demanding course. You definitely don't want to be having oversteer around here. It does clip the wall as well a little bit further around. The Renault 5 Turbo is across the line, but it is going to go to the bottom of the table. A 1 minute point. One couldn't quite get under the 1 minute. Not a place that you want to stick the car. The first kind of big crash that we saw on the course, I think just about everything had clonked the wall, whether it be during the run-up or after the finish line. But, yeah, big clonk into the tyre bundle. The next car to take on the course, the BMW M4 GTS. Again, this is another vehicle that would start off in S-Class. Only just into S-Class, so you can drop the PI down. But, yeah, you wouldn't have much in the way of, well, you wouldn't have any in the way of upgrades really to play around with on this car. We'd seen a couple of decent-sized shunts on the way up here. So, again, it becomes a risk versus reward. Do you push the car really hard at trying to get that ultimate fast time, but run the risk of clonking into a wall at, at some point and completely ruining the run? Do you focus on just making sure you can get to the top of the course cleanly, even if you know there might possibly be a little bit more speed in the car? Again, no one quite making the most of that first fast corner. No one quite brave enough to really run the cars right out towards the exit. Again, BMW a little bit safer around the final few corners, but was very quick on the early sections. It crosses the line and becomes the first car not to clonk into the finish wall. And that would be good for a third place. The M4 GTS is only a tenth of a second down on the Meyers Manx. Is well clear of the Ferrari 355 and that Chevrolet Camaro. But, yeah, 6/10 away from the leader. BMW having two cars on the podium so far. Next vehicle to take on the course, Aston Martin V12 Vantage. So far, these kind of larger and heavier coupes have not been faring massively well on this course. Could the Aston Martin change that, though? Plenty of power in this car, but would it be a little bit too heavy for this technical section? It does look surprisingly slow when you're watching it from the onboard cameras. It's, yeah, kind of deceptive, and sure enough, the Aston Martin trying to be that little bit brave, trying to carry that bit more speed. It's a slightly different way of clonking that wall. Got turned in for the first part, but just couldn't make it into the second bit of the corner. Still not quite all the way out towards the wall through this next part, although a big slide almost from the Aston Martin up towards the finish line. Not the worst clonk that you could have done on the run. However, it is a 52.2. It does beat the Infiniti and the Renault 5, but can't go quicker than that Camaro. I think the Aston Martin perhaps a little bit too big, a little bit too heavy for this course. It's yeah, was not a massive fan. Gearing might not even help that car either with those lower speed sections. It didn't look like it was particularly enjoying them. Up next, we have got the first Mazda, the RX7. This one with the full Liberty Bunny kit on the car. Of course, the advantage of those, you will get some pretty decent-sized tyres on this. In fact, it's decent sized tyres, relatively light, and probably a fair amount of power on the vehicle. Again, a decent combination, and you would hope having some good grip coming up towards this, coming up towards the S's. This is what's got out so many cars, and it's another one into the wall. Very, very similar place to the Renault 5 Turbo. This time around, it wasn't the RX7 having the back end get away from it, just a little bit too late on the brake. That's all it takes. We say it's tiny, like meters make huge differences around this course. The RX7 is a little bit braver coming over the top of the hill. That's a little bit too brave. I'm not sure if the car quite got airtime, but it was certainly enough to unload the front of the car. Just can't quite get the vehicle turned in. It would clonk the wall again before the finish line. Not the cleanest of runs for the RX-7, and indeed it goes down into a 7th place, a 52.9, a tenth of a second faster than the Infiniti. As I said, the Infiniti, considering it went for a spin, did get going remarkably quickly. Yeah, a number of cars pushing, trying to get near those Manx, near the BMWs, and just asking that little bit too much of their vehicles. Up next was always going to be a big threat, the Lotus Elise. While it hasn't got a crazy amount of power, of course, we know how well these cars handle. It might not be the fastest accelerating down towards the first corner, although of course helped by being incredibly light, and it is a bit of a dicey turn one for the Lotus, sort of skating in on the brakes, very nearly ends up in the tyre bundle on the outside, gets away with all of that as we get into the technical S's. The Lotus is absolutely flying through here. Nothing quite as fast through that section so far as the Elise as it comes up now towards the two fast right-handers. How brave will the Lotus be? The back end is moving around a little bit. There's more commitment from the Lotus than we have seen from some other cars, and it's again looking like it's going to get a big slide. Keeps it all on the track. It's very fast through those final couple of corners, and it's across the line for the Elise. Little bit dicey on the way through the first corner, however, made up the time later on in the run, and it would go to the top of the table. 48.4, again, it's half a second down the road from that BMW. The Manx will hold on to a podium. The M4 just dropped down that little bit further. Yeah, slightly scary through that first corner. Very nearly went terribly wrong for the Lotus, but made it up later on in the run. I would be the next car to take on the course with my 288 GTO. Decent enough start from the Ferrari, and we'd heard, because we didn't know at the time quite how the leaderboard was shaping up, we'd heard of various cars having issues, having crashes on their way up through the course. I knew I needed to keep things clean with this car. That is, though, much easier said than done as we head up through the S's. I just turned it a little bit too soon. Catch the wall. Now, it doesn't cost me as much time as it has cost some vehicles, but in bouncing off the wall ever so slightly, I end up out wide. There's a big slide from the Ferrari. I'm not quite as brave on the way in through these final quarters. Certainly not through the first part. Through the second part, I give it a go. Throw the Ferrari in. The crest there is so horrible because you think you've got enough grip as you turn in. The car just gets bounced up into the air as across the line for the Ferrari. Yeah, scrape on the wall wasn't ideal for me. That being said, we still get a good time in the 288. It'll put me up into a podium spot for now, a 49.2. If I hadn't scraped the wall and got a big oversteer moment, I feel like maybe, just maybe, could have got the BMW. But, yeah, just tiniest fraction turned in too soon and got my Ferrari into a little bit of bother. Still a good time, though. A couple of tenths faster than that Meyers Manx. There were just two cars remaining to take on this course. A Porsche 911 GT3 would be the next car. Again, rear-engined in this one, likely to be pretty damn good off the line, and that's certainly going to help with your time. If you can get good starts with the vehicles here, it's going to help your time later around the course. Always concerns with Porsche's rear engines with the front wanting to lift up through the corners, but it wouldn't be that would catch out this 911. The same wall again would claim another vehicle. It's just asking that little bit too much of the car under brakes. It looks like as far as a handling vehicle goes, this one wasn't having any problems with the front end lifting up, especially at a very hilly, very bouncy course such as this. Does get a very big slide on his way through towards this final corner with a wheel on the grass. Is not what you want to be doing. But yeah, just an outbreak moment. Again, not a horrendous spin for the Porsche, but it's enough to cost him some time. We'll go into 8th place. The rest of the run, though, was pretty good. A 51.5, only a 10th down on the Camaro. So to have done that sort of speed while having clonked the wall fairly heavily on the way into the S's is a decent speed. It could well have challenged for a podium had it not been for that fairly heavy crash. The final car to take on the course. Another Mazda, the MX5 Super 20. Now this always a potential for the MX5 to be a challenger. Of course, we'd seen what the Elise had done. We'd seen the speed of the Elise up here. Could the MX5 be getting near to that one? Because again, it's small, it's light, it's going to be agile through the S's. It didn't have a big wiggle on the way through the first corner. Doesn't go in too deep through the first part of the S's. Keeps everything neat and tidy. But this is where the Lotus was so very, very fast as we run up towards the top of the course. A tiny misstep with the braking through here can cost you so much time. The MX5 plays it a little safe on the way in. Make sure he gets the cars turned in. You certainly don't want to have big oversteer on the first part. Across the crash is another car that is just starting to think about sliding around. It doesn't quite as it gets across the line for the MX5. Would it be enough to beat the Lotus? No, not quite. It would be a 49.7 from that Mazda. We'll put it in to 6th place. It's a very, very close mid-pack of the table. From my Ferrari in 3rd down to 6th is only half a second in all of that. It was, yeah, a very, very close table, but the Elise would claim a victory from the BMW in 2nd, my Ferrari in 3rd. At the bottom of the table, we have the assortment of slightly dinged car, the Aston Martin Vantage, the RX7, the Infiniti, and the Renault. Yeah, it's an incredibly demanding route to be taking. The tiniest of mistakes will cost you so much time. It's, yeah, a real risk versus reward challenge, this one. So well done to EVR Liam T with that Lotus for claiming the fastest time. That car will indeed be king of the mountain. Fairly pleased with my Ferrari for ending up in 3rd, despite almost so nearly binning that vehicle in the wall. That, though, is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.